quit my job maybe 3 months before 9/11, and that was the day that I sent in the paperwork to register the company on September 10th. And then the next day, 9/11 hit. And that was it. The funding for any travel ideas for business in general, no funding at all available for at least a year for these kind of ideas. Nobody wanted to do a startup and nobody wanted to do a travel startup. So I pushed through and said, I'm already committed at this point. I should have been committed into an insane asylum because there's a very slim chance I was going to make this thing work.
I always just tell people you just gotta soak it up. Hi guys, I'm Jack Payne and this is the Friday Sponge, where I sit down with founders, operators, and leaders to talk about the part of the story nobody tells. The decisions, the risks, the lessons from long before success was obvious. Let's get into it.
So I always had an interest in starting my own business. I think maybe because I can't be managed or supervised is probably it. It's always one of those things where you have a boss that you know better than he does, and you may know the direction better than he does, and so you always have this inkling in the back of your head, like I can do this better myself, and I should open up my own company doing this.
Before we get to how you founded International Voyager, why don't we rewind to what you were doing before that?
Yeah, absolutely. How far back do you want me to go?
As far back as you want to go.
It goes way back.
Whatever you're comfortable talking about. We could go all the way back to college, high school.
I guess we could probably start my first job out of college. I did summer internships for banks in New York. So for 2 summers, I went in and did, sort of internship summer jobs, and sort of commuted into New York from Rutherford, New Jersey, where my parents lived at the time. And it was good. It was fun. It was fun to get out of work at the end of the day and run over to the South Street Seaport and think about all the money you could potentially make in banking someday, right? Like investment banking. After college, I graduated, and one of the guys I had worked with offered me a job, and he worked at a big institutional investing company. I think it was called AmBase, across from the Treasury, and they invested in institutional funds. So I jumped in and did that. I think I was called an institutional administrator. So sort of the dirty work of the guys who do the big trades, and you were crunching numbers and you were making sure trades were getting processed, that kind of stuff. But it was fun, interesting work, and you could see the guys above you, how much money they were making and potentially what you could do. And that was exciting, I guess, if it was all about the money. And at that point, I guess in your life, you're coming out of college and it's all about it's especially being downtown on Wall Street. It's all about seeing everybody around you, and you sort of feel like it's all about the money. And then I met your Aunt Teresa, and we were dating, and she ended up getting a job with the company, and she was going to do writing for them. They're a publishing company, and they're based out of Miami with offices throughout the Caribbean. And they needed a writer and they needed a business manager to go down to the Caribbean and run the office. And that meant we were managing most of the Caribbean except for the western side of it. Anyhow, a lot of publications, about 100 a year that they published. That was sort of where I fell in love with the Caribbean. That's where I really got to work for a small business. And I think a lot of the people that we were hanging around with down there, pretty much all of them had their own businesses. I mean, to be in the Caribbean, there weren't a lot of large companies down there. So most people had started their own companies. After a hurricane, now fast forward a little bit, after a pretty massive hurricane called Marilyn, it just devastated the island. I think we lost like 80% of our roofs. And at the same time, I just launched my first website. It was dutyfree.com. Okay. And I got the local retailers to give me pictures of their Rolexes and Breitlings and things like that, and their expensive jewelry. And I put it up on this site, and I had no idea. It was the very early days of the internet. There wasn't even, the only browser was called Mosaic. And I put these pages up on dutyfree.com, pictures of beautiful watches and diamonds and stuff. And people from around the world started going to our forum, and there wasn't even really email available. There was no credit card processing, and they started sending their orders in with their credit card numbers. Please purchase this and send it to me. And I'm like, oh my God, within a week, this new media, I realized had this global reach, right? We had these magazines that had a very local reach, but this could reach anybody in the world, and people were wanting to buy products. So I went off to a company called America Online out of Vienna, Virginia, and helped. I was working on business development, helping get in their travel channel, getting their travel ventures off the ground. They were the first ones to launch an actual booking engine where you could book your flight, your hotel, your car. And I did that for some time, and then decided I wanted to be back in New York, got a job at the New York Times. We had launched So New York Times has has the newspaper, and then it also has a magazine group. And the
Okay.
magazine group has some really fun magazine titles. We had Golf Digest, Golf World, Tennis Magazine, Snow Country, Sailing World, like all these great magazines that were all over the newsstands when people used to read
I was gonna
magazines.
say back
Yeah,
back when we had
not
magazines.
anymore. When we
Maybe
had
now the
magazines,
doctor's office still, yeah, but
yeah, yeah, the old magazine, the doctor's office, and the New York Times at the time bought all these great URLs, golf.com, tennis.com. They bought them for all of these different publications they had. So I was there to help get those off the ground. So we were using this great content from the magazines. We were using the sales guys from the magazines to help sell into this website, these website properties, and I was involved with managing those. And then I just kept getting recruited from one place to another. I went from there to to a search engine called snap.com, much better than Google during the time, but it was there with
yeah,
all the other search engines like us, web crawler, all those kind of ones. And and it was an exciting place to be until we got purchased by General Electric, and they decided to make us a wing of NBC. I don't know it was very early on. I
yeah,
know you figure it wasn't much of a fit, but they wanted us to put video into the site. And this was still during the dial-up connection days when people didn't have broadband. So you'd be waiting for 20 minutes for your video to start.
yeah.
And I did that, really loved that because they put me in 30 Rock in Rockefeller Center. They didn't know what to do with us and me and my team. My company was located in California and San Francisco. My team was in New York. They didn't know what to do with us. So they looked at us like we were a bunch of comedians, and they put us on the floor with Saturday Night Live on the 17th floor of
Okay.
30 Rock. So, our little offices were here, and then next to us was like the room that they'd practiced for the skits at SNL. And we're intermingled with the staff of SNL because the guys at 30 Rock, which just like that TV show, 30 Rock, didn't
Yeah, yeah.
understand what we did and how
What
we
you
worked.
did.
And they thought we were like some sort of joke and just stuck us in that part of the building. And then
Yeah.
my last gig after I left there was I got recruited by a company called Idea Lab, and they were an incubator. They're an incubator out of Pasadena, California. And they're opening a big office in New York, multi-billions of dollars in funding, and they would incubate new business ideas. So I went in as an entrepreneur in residence. And what would happen is entrepreneurs would come in with an idea, half-baked idea, typically, maybe a little IP something they owned or some little app they built or something.
Yeah.
But there was no way they were going to get it off the ground without some help. And then we would put them through the cycle at Idea Lab, and we would vet the idea, fund the idea in some case, or bring additional funders into the idea. Our legal team would incorporate the whole thing, get it set up. Our design and marketing teams our development teams would build the product. Our marketing teams would then put the plans together and then execute marketing plans. And the whole thing was to grow that thing really fast, to accelerate its growth. And usually what happened is, I would say one out of 10 would be usually successful. And we had a couple that went public. And
Wow.
then I would say 2 out of 10 maybe would be viable businesses, but not really hits, and not the kind of thing an investor would want to get behind. So they would try to unload those. Sometimes they would shut them down, which I thought was a little unfair because those businesses were still viable businesses, providing
Yeah.
jobs, making money, but not enough for those guys. And then the other ones would just typically go out of business, usually because they were being pushed so hard by this Idea Lab machine that the wheels would come off. Like they wanted to push that thing so fast through the cycle that it wasn't given enough time to develop properly. So, but they
Yeah.
did get hits, and they did have some of the biggest disasters though as well too in the internet. If you remember, you wouldn't remember, but others may. Etoys.com, pets.com. These are really famous. Like they had this sock puppet, pets.com.
Yeah.
They
I remember
advertised
my
in the
dad
Super.
showing me it. I think you
Oh
guys pulled it
yeah.
out. Yeah.
I mean, they advertise in the Super Bowl. Now those are viable businesses today because you have like a distribution structure behind it where you can deliver 50-pound bags of dog food and still make money on it. But back in
Yeah.
those days, nothing was set up to be able to do that kind of thing. So I always had an interest in starting my own business, and you always have this inkling in the back of your head, like I can do this better myself and I should open up my own company doing this. So traveled from New York to the Caribbean, from the Caribbean to Virginia back to New York again. And I was going to launch a travel incubator called International Voyager. So I was taking the concept from Idea Lab, but I was just going to focus on travel because I thought there were so many areas of travel that were underserved at that point. I thought we can do this business. We'll open an incubator. We'll launch travel companies. We'll get funding like Idea Lab does, and then other entrepreneurs with travel ideas can come into this incubator and we'll help accelerate those through the process like Idea Lab was doing. quit my job maybe 3 months before 9/11, and that was the day that I sent in the paperwork to register the company on September 10th. And then the next day, 9/11 hit. And that was it. The funding for any travel ideas for business in general. It was like a 2008 type of crisis or even a pandemic type of crisis. So no funding at all available for at least a year for these kind of ideas. Nobody wanted to do a startup and nobody wanted to do a travel startup.
Yeah.
So I pushed through and said, I'm already committed at this point. I should have been committed into an insane asylum because there's a very slim chance I was going to make this thing work. And I just decided I was going to push through and we were going to do the travel incubator and I moved forward with it. I would say it
Yeah.
probably took an extra year because of that to really get the kind of traction that I had hoped, but it gave me time to slow grow these things, and it also had me probably set them up in a better way than if they were heavily funded and I had a lot of partners, not partners, but investors who wanted this thing accelerated, who might have stopped the insanity that I was pushing through
Right.
on. So yeah, there was nobody
And
there to stop me, I guess.
stop you, besides you.
Yeah.
Besides you. So at this point, you're living in Montclair, New Jersey. You've decided I'm going to walk away from the establishment, if you will, right? Working a corporate job. And you've gone from now commuting into the city to now doing, I guess, what a lot of people are doing now, working at home, right, in your basement and setting up
Yeah.
shop.
Setting up shop. And I ended up going back to my old company, the search engine, because they were folding at that point. And I bought 8 workstations from them. I bought eight, and back then computers are not a dime a dozen like they are today, but I bought 8 workstations and 8 cubicles, and I put them all into the basement of my house. A very raw basement. It was a pretty raw basement. So I painted it, made it look a little bit better. So I had this setup that I could bring 8 people in, and I had all the departments that I was planning for, and I had a little conference table and lights and stuff like that. And I just started hiring people, and they were
Yeah.
coming to my house. They were coming to the house, Jack. Like, we live on a busy street in Montclair, and you weren't allowed to park in the street. And in
Yeah.
the morning, when everybody else is heading out to work, people were arriving into my driveway. So I had like a stack of cars and people
Yeah.
coming out. And this was before like anybody would work at home. So it was looked upon like, are you nuts? So they're coming in the front
Right.
door into the basement, and we were working long hours down there
What are
with
the
a team
Maguires
of
doing over
people.
there? The neighbors. It's
Oh my
like out.
God. I think,
It's like out of Christmas Vacation with what's her name from Seinfeld, looking through the window like
oh,
Margot. What are they doing over
yeah,
there? It's like
it was
10 o'clock at
exactly.
night.
And at one point we took a vacation with the family, and Teresa was saying like, well, what are we doing here? They can't come here on Monday. I'm like, they have to come here on Monday. There's no like, they didn't even have internet at home. I don't think at that point they had
Yeah.
our computers are full size computer. I'm like, no, they have to come here. Well, we're away, and we have to leave the door open because there's no basement bathroom. So they have to come upstairs to use our
Yeah.
bathroom. So it was, yeah, it was a funny moment, but we survived the first year, which was really the most important thing. And
Yeah.
I think probably one of the things was the cruise space was probably one of the most helpful. They were one of the ones that were in highest risk, and they provided funding to me. I mean, I went to them and told them about the idea about we're going to book cruises online, and they all really liked it. And they gave me funding. They pulled it out of their co-op marketing budget. So I'd get
Hmm.
20,000 here, 10,000 there. And it added up enough to, along with the credit card that I was using to fund it, that and their funds was enough to get the business started, especially since I was doing it in such a scrappy way at that point.
And when you
So,
say using a credit card to fund it, what do you mean by that? Like
it's
all
a
the whole
typical,
company is riding on your credit card?
I maybe a little bit. Well, I mean, it wasn't as big as Max on it. I don't think I got as big as Mac. Maybe I had a 15 or $20,000 limit on the card. So it was one of those ways of financing it. I did have money from when I exited the company that I worked for. The search engine did do a reverse IPO, which I
Okay.
think is called it's a SPAC today. What do they call them? So that's what they used to call it back in those days. So I had some funding from that I was holding aside, but I
Okay.
did most of it from the money that I was able to raise from suppliers, and then a credit card to back it up. So yeah.
And so when you're finding yourself in these rooms with these major cruise lines, right? I mean, we're talking what?
Yeah.
We're talking like Carnival, we're talking like Norwegian. Like, what were the cruise lines then?
Royal, Celebrity, a lot of the same ones we see today
Okay,
back then, except for MSC. MSC is a brand new cruise line. There's a couple other new ones too. Virgin wasn't around, Ritz
sure,
Carlton, Four Seasons, those kind of cruise lines weren't around. But a lot of the big ones that you're familiar with, Carnival, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Princess, all of
sure.
these lines were around at that point. Yeah, Holland America.
And now you had cultivated these connections through your time now being in the islands, or you just muscled your way in there? Like, how did you make that? How
Not
did you
at
make that
all. I mean,
connection?
in the islands, we did have partnerships with the cruise lines. So we put our books on their ships, our destination guides and those kind of things. And when we sold advertising into those publications, we'd share that revenue with them. So they were sort of carrying our publications customized to that cruise line, like what to do, what to do St. Thomas or the Royal Caribbean like guide. So
Yeah,
we were sharing revenue back with them in that direction, but I didn't have any real context from it. And I had left the business. So I was out of the business working for America Online, working for New York Times, working for
right.
the search engine and NBC for 8, 9 years at that point. So I was pretty distant from the business. But when I was looking at travel, there was a couple ones that were totally underserved. And I looked at cruise and there was nobody really doing anything of value in the cruise segment in terms of getting people to book online, right? Getting people to plan their vacation. And it's information intensive as when you're planning any kind of vacation, right? It's all about pictures and copy and content. It was a lot of the same things we did with our publications back in the Caribbean. So it made sense to me. And so we needed that. It was an underserved market. Private jets was another area that I was in. That was an
Mm,
underserved market through a brand I had called jettrip.com.
okay.
Incentive Trip was another brand that we had created because we had packaged up like surplus inventory from big hotel chains. And we sold those certificates off en masse to companies like mortgage companies that would use them as a gift. If you applied for a mortgage, you could get this weekend getaway. So we did that as well too through
Wow.
incentivetrip.com. So there was a bunch of different concepts that I incubated that were my own brands. And then I was looking to bring other people into it as well too.
Sure.
But we became so busy with those brands that I had between the private jet business with Jet Trip and Incentive Trip that it sucked up all my time. So there was no way I could
Yeah.
look at bringing external entrepreneurs into it at that point. So we became sort of our own incubator for our own concepts.
Fair. So there was one thing I was always, it kind of blew my mind, which was that when you think about developing all of these different, it was a website really when you first created everything, right? It still to this day is a website people can check out online. You don't
Yeah, yeah.
personally have any coding background, right? Like you were not like one of these guys who went to school, computer science, like when you worked at
No,
any of this, like how did you build the website? How does that even happen if you don't know code back then?
I yeah, I loved coding as a kid, but it's really hard. It was hard. There was no computers back then. It was like Apple, what was it? Apple Mac 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
There's just some really rudimentary cut. And I remember creating games for them when I was in high school. And to me, that was pretty advanced. And then did it in college, probably the first 2 years, but then sort of it faded away in the background. And then I didn't come back to it until I started dutyfree.com. And that was with some geeky guy that I'd met who managed some servers in this windowless room in my building where the office was in St. Thomas. And him and I met a couple times and he said, there's this new browser, Mosaic. You can see it anywhere in the world. And if you use this basic HTML coding, we can create a page similar to the pages you have in your magazines. And I'm like, sounds sort of cool. And
yeah,
what we did create as far as our website was a magazine-like website. It was
okay,
similar type of design treatment. And then after that, I, I I did not, I knew enough about coding to do some of it, but I knew enough to be able to manage those people who were doing it and to be able to hire development companies and manage their work and know what was possible and impossible. And usually it was the most important thing to me, what was possible. So if I had a coding company come back to me and say, yeah, we really can't do it, or my God, that's going to take $100,000 to do. I knew enough to say, it is possible and we can get it done for 5,000, or I can find somebody who can get it done for 5,000. So I think
sure,
through that, and then using everything really early on. I was doing this really early on. I found offshore resources like in the early 2000s. I don't think anybody was doing it that way, but it was just too expensive. I couldn't afford to use
yeah,
anybody in the US because the price of coding was insanely expensive. So I was able to find people in places like mostly India, some in Eastern Europe, and I would get them to do the work. But it was
Yeah.
really such early days. I don't know how I pulled that off. I don't know how I found those people when I think about it now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like from what you've said, what you've shared, it's the identification of knowing what you're good at, obviously leveraging your experiences, but being very comfortable and being able to delegate responsibilities, right? Like
Yeah,
you had to be
absolutely.
comfortable enough to like say, okay, not a lot of people do this, but I'm going to reach out to some type of consultant in India and I'm going to allow that. Here's my idea, here's what I need, and then execute on it. And then, as you mentioned, be a project manager, right? And be able to successfully
Yeah.
like navigate through all that. Would you say
And I
that?
think my
Go ahead.
my
I'm
my
sorry.
MBA probably was Idea Lab. So I wanted to do this earlier on, and even after St. Thomas, I went out to California and stayed at my cousin's house, and I went to the first Netscape conference. Now I know that means nothing to you, but to people that were in the early days of the internet, they're like, "Oh my God, it's Andreessen." Mark Andreessen created the first browser called Netscape, and that's where he's one of the richest men in the world because of all of his
Sure.
other investments. But so that wanted to do it early, but didn't quite understand it. Once I got to the D Lab and I was able to walk around the floor and see how these different departments function. And I guess that's probably where the offshore stuff came from because the people that were in charge of product were shipping all the stuff off to these random people in India and Pakistan. I'm like, I could do this.
Yeah.
And at one point, I was going to launch it inside of Idea Lab. That was my original idea. But Idea Lab would also take 51% interest in any
Wow.
idea. They owned 51% of the company. They had a controlling interest. And I said, I don't know if I need them. I don't know if I need them and I don't want to give them away 51%. And if my idea is good, but not great, they're going to land up blowing the wheels off of my idea and shutting me down if it's not going to become like a true one in like a true unicorn, they'll probably shut it down and my dream will go away. So that was the reason I said I'm going to do this myself.
Yeah. So with Idea Lab, like you said, you had that the history, you kind of understood how they work. But for a lot of people, they don't have an Idea Lab, right? And I think today's version of Idea Lab,
Yeah,
I don't know if Idea Lab is still around. Is it still around?
it is. And they're mostly focused on, I think, bioengineering kind of work. They're not much into into this space anymore, into the digital space. They've sort of left
Sure.
that.
Because when I think of Idea Lab, I think of like Y Combinator today, right? Where everybody's just plowing in
Yeah.
there. You basically get this
Yep.
fantastic group behind you that can hopefully jumpstart everything for you, right? But
Absolutely.
e even when you get past that first year, which for you, I mean, was unbelievable to have started at such a terrible time like 2001, right at the end of 2001 to get into the travel space, you're probably sitting here questioning yourself like, why did I ever do this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, how could you? You're like, how is this not a sign? Like, go back to what I know and go back to what it was, right? But what characteristics or what do you think separated you from other founders who maybe never got past that version one or got past that first year? Was it the fact that you didn't have these other partners or investors breathing down your neck? Was it the fact that you knew you would not let yourself fail? Like what kept you going when you were going through all of this?
I have this ridiculous persistence that I just don't quit. And it's part of it is it's probably a plus, but it's also a character flaw as well too. That I will just continue, like I will just keep going, and so I guess I have a this optimism, right? That it's this is going to happen, and every day sort of wake up and say. Today's going to be a different day than yesterday. Yesterday was 9/11, but today is 9/12. And even
Yeah,
when times got tough, I felt like I could continue to push forward. I also felt like in some ways too, I had like almost like Cortez, right? I sort of, I guess you could say, set the ships ablaze, right? So there was
yeah,
no going back.
yeah,
Yeah, because I'd left the place I'd worked at. We had now entered into, because of 9/11, everything had changed for that year. The economy took a huge hit. E-commerce had taken a huge hit. So there were not the kind of jobs that were available anyhow. If I'd stuck with my job, I would have been able to continue through. But at that point, trying to turn and come out of it probably would have been too tough. So it was sort of like Cortez, I had set the ships ablaze and I was
yeah.
moving forward. So yeah.
Absolutely. And when you finally committed, right? You burned the boats. There was no plan B. There was only execute, execute, execute. When did you first start to notice some momentum? Like you feel like I actually have something here.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't too long after that that back in those days, and people do today too. I think anybody launching a business probably do the same thing. You start watching the servers, right? You start watching the server reports. You can see them real time. And then all of a sudden you see the board start lighting up with people coming in. And in some cases, you don't know why they got there. I mean, we weren't spending a lot of money yet on marketing. I knew a lot about search engine optimization, so I was using that approach to try to attract users to the website. I can't even call them customers. And the board was lighting up with these random people coming in from all over the world, like sort of like the dutyfree.com thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's working. They're coming. And the search engine spiders are finding us, and they're
Yeah.
listing us, and traffic is coming. So then we slowly started doing some paid advertising and just continued to grow the business at that point. Yeah.
When all this really started to maybe take off and you didn't necessarily have to be the watchdog anymore and you could take like a vacation because the office was no longer in your basement. Like at that point, how were you able to start living life a little bit more for yourself, but still feel comfortable with the business running without you? Because I feel like that's really hard for a lot of founders.
Yeah, I think it is really hard. And I, still, when I traveled, would keep an eye on things. So back then it wasn't as easy to stay online and make sure that you were touching base with the team and pulling reports up and getting reports and that kind of thing. But I would still look at stuff. And I think one thing probably why people end up quitting is with any business in that first year, maybe 2 years, maybe even beyond that in some cases, like your friends may be working 40-hour work week, and they'll be exhausted in some cases, like, oh my God, I work till 7 tonight or 6 tonight. I was working 80 hours at that point a week because you couldn't afford to hire anyone else, and you were doing every job, and you did
Yeah.
that for years. And I think every entrepreneur has to do that. It just sort of it builds character. It helps you understand every aspect of your business. So I think that's probably one thing that you do get to a point of sheer exhaustion where you look at what you're doing and go, is this worth it? Is this 80 hours a week? Am I seeing a payout from this? How long am I going to do this for? And even to
Yeah.
this day, as we rolled into the pandemic, right, it sort of turned back into that world again for me. And I was
Yeah.
shocked because I think 18 and 19 before the pandemic, I was in a great place. And I think I was clocking probably about 3 months of vacation time in those
Wow.
last 2 years before the pandemic. So getting a chance to travel the world, using some of our product, right? Taking cruises around the world, but also
Yeah.
doing a lot of our own sailing and exploring and everything else. And that's really what I really have a passion for and love doing. So I was really excited that we were able to do that as a family, and everything was moving along. We were cruising along and until the
Yeah.
pandemic, and it was really before, probably about 3 months before the pandemic, I had about 3 offers to sell the company, and I was ready to let it go at that point because
I remember
the
that.
offers were
Yeah.
very good. And yeah, and we were having really, really great years. So the multiple of that great year was really great.
Yeah.
But I was really enjoying myself at that point. And since we were getting plenty of time to enjoy ourselves and I had a good team that was managing things, I held off and I said, you know what? Another year from now, profits will be that much higher. The multiple will even be better. And then I could be done. And then sometimes you get a little bit greedy, and we rolled into a global pandemic, and boy, did everything change for us at that point.
So before that happened, right? So we're talking like life's great, like you said, like you guys are down in the islands, you're taking some
Yeah.
time away with the family, company's running itself. I mean, we're thinking about exit, like that's the perfect scenario, right? That's what every founder dreams of. At that point,
Yeah.
how many people were in the company? How many
We had
workers did you have?
three, about three and a half dozen people at that point.
Three and a half dozen. So
Yeah.
starting from just
Yeah.
cabin, your 1 year old, to now three and a half
Yeah.
dozen people
Myself and
working for you,
Kevin.
right? Scattered all over the
Yeah.
globe. So not everybody's in your basement anymore. These are people that are all over the
Mm,
place, right?
Well, we had them at that point. We had an office in Morristown. So
Okay.
we had people in Morristown, and we had an office in Fort Lauderdale. So that was where
Okay.
our call center was located, in Fort Lauderdale.
Sure.
So yeah, so we had two places that we had people. And we had some people that were overseas as well too, because we needed customers were coming in from around the world. They were They spoke different languages, so we needed to have people that could speak those languages. And I found the easiest way to hire people that speak German or French or Spanish is to hire people in Germany, France, and Central America to deal with them. So we
Yeah,
started going a little bit more global. Our developers were already either in Eastern Europe and India like they are today, and we just
yeah,
started offshoring our service teams as well too, our sales and service teams. So it made a lot of
sure.
sense. Yeah, and the people I had, I mean, I think my pinnacle was probably in 19 away for a month on the boat. I made one phone call to the office for 15 minutes during that whole time, and I hadn't checked internet the whole time I was out there. So that
That's
was
amazing.
probably where I felt
The
really
peak.
comfortable that I sort of the peak when I felt like I'd mastered working on the business instead of in the business, right? That's what they always say. You want to work on the business. So you're sort of separated and working strategically on the business, not being in the business, like
Right.
talking to everybody, reminding everybody, micromanaging everybody, but working on the business. I think that was probably the peak of it at that point. Yeah.
Sure. And just for some listeners who maybe don't know all this finance lingo, right? When you say multiple, right, what exactly is that? And when you think about selling a company, like, does that mean you were looking to IPO and now you're in like the stock exchange? Like, what does exactly that look
No,
like?
but 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 exchange does have something to do with it. So there's a multiple of you could do a multiple of revenue, a multiple of sales, multiple of EBITDA, your earnings
Sure.
before interest and taxes. And that's what I was doing. That's in my business in the e-commerce world is but generally of EBITDA. So
Okay.
it would be a multiple depending on how much revenue you're generating. It could be anywhere from and how unique your business is and sort of your IP, how maybe some technologies that you built into what you're doing, you can get a multiple anywhere from probably from six. I've had friends that have gotten them up to 15 of your profit. So if your
Okay.
profit's 2 million bucks, you're looking at a maximum multiple of like 15. You're at 30 million bucks in that case before
Wow.
taxes that somebody would acquire you. Of course, the terms are always depends on who's trying to acquire you, whether it's a strategic or whether it's private equity. Private equity just sees you making lots of profit, and it makes more sense to invest money in you and capture that profit than putting it into the markets. And then
Sure.
strategic would be somebody like one of our big competitors, maybe like Priceline or Booking.com, right? And they're like, we're weak in the cruise component. We want to hire this company to do this for us. So
Yeah.
we don't have to build that out ourselves. Now, the multiple sort of the multiple does reflect what's going on in the markets, right? So if Priceline is getting a multiple of 16 to 1, right? By buying us at 7, they can more than double their money by picking up somebody like us and then folding our revenue into what they do. And
Right.
maybe in some cases too, also give them the ability to launch a new channel that they haven't had before.
Sure. So it's, in
Yeah.
other words, it can be looked at as a strategic partnership for them where they can acquire something that they don't have, or you have somebody that looks at you as like a cash cow and they want a piece of it in kind in a
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. So it's
Right.
either we're fine putting money into it because the profit this thing throws off, and within 3 years that whole investment has been paid for. Private equity, and in the strategic case, like, yeah, we have this big multiple. If we can increase our bottom line, like it will, and we get them at a cheaper multiple than what our multiple is, it's well worth for us to pick them up, and
Sure.
let's go with it. So
Right.
yeah,
And then once again, EBITDA for most people, it's really just taking your profits minus your expenses, and then it's just getting to the core of what how profitable you are in a lot of ways, right? Just
got
to
it.
bring it to the simplest of levels, we're talking like finance 101, like what like that's what it really
Absolutely.
looks like, right?
Yeah, and I probably should give a there was a guy that I did a program with at Warden. His name is Greg Crabtree, and he wrote a book called Simple Numbers. And before that, I was pretty complicated. My spreadsheets, what I would look at on my dashboard were, were literally 700 data points looked at on a yesterday, the month to date versus same time last year, last month, those kind of things. And
Yeah.
after I went to his program and read his book called Simple Numbers, I decided to hire him to help me out. Not hire him as an employee, but hire him as a consultant. And he really shed some light on you really need to distill down to the 2 or 3 numbers that make a difference in your business, which is what we did. We distilled it down to 2 numbers that were critically important for us that would help drive our business. One is called LER, labor efficiency ratio. For me,
Okay.
it's different for every business. And ROAS, return on ad spend. Those are the 2 numbers. If I could move those levers, I could substantially increase our profitability and our growth in our business. And that's what I did.
And you hire this individual, is this before or after the pandemic?
before the pandemic, before the
Okay.
pandemic. And Greg was great. The only thing that I think probably was I should have exited, and I think he was probably the person in my ear saying, "Why would you exit?
Why
Because
would
this
you
thing
exit?
is generating such you're generating such great profits, and if you exit and got your earnings from this, and you tried to put it into the market, you could never make the money you're making here. So
Anywhere near it?
it's a money machine. Continue to run with this thing, and I
Yeah.
guess I probably otherwise might have sold at that point
Um,
before the pandemic, but I didn't. With that
yeah.
another voice in the back of my mind telling me you may want to hold on to this thing. It's generating great money, and you're enjoying yourself now. So
Right. And I mean, look, hindsight, it's always there, right? But you get through it.
absolutely, yeah.
You get to the pandemic, and I know this was a super hard time for you again. I mean, probably, would you say it was harder or the same level of difficulties when you first started?
Much, much harder because when I first
Much
started, it
harder.
was only me and
Just you.
Calvin in a chair. There was
Right,
nobody, there was
right.
nobody else there.
So now
So
people
you
counting
didn't
on
have,
you.
there was, people are counting on you. You have overhead. You have, I mean, your burn rate is, I think my burn rate going into the pandemic was probably, I don't know, $350,000 a month, meaning that those were my expenses, right? And you can't just turn
Hmm.
them off overnight. It takes some time. You have contracts, you have agreements with people,
Yeah.
and you have to you have to get yourself off of these expenses as quickly as possible. So much, much harder. And at that point, we had an office in Morristown in Headquarters Plaza, I had about 6 months before that went to the Philippines to Manila, and I set up a center there in
Wow.
Penanga, which is Clark Air Force Base, formerly Clark Air Force Base up there, to set up development, some accounting, sales, and service out of that office. So I had this office and I had that office. And I'll never forget the day. So many people had the same experience I did. I remember being in our building, and I think it was right the day maybe before St. Patrick's Day, like somewhere around there, maybe the 17th or 16th or 15th. And I remember they came around our building telling us the building was closed and everybody had to leave, but would probably be reopened in about a week from now. So just grab the most immediate things you need and you can head home. And I remember
Right.
driving home, and I called out to my manager in the Philippines, and I said, and part of the reason for the Philippines was we had storms here in New Jersey, and we had one in Florida as well too, hurricanes, right? That could
Sure.
affect us. So the idea of having a redundant office in the Philippines was like, it is on the opposite and 12-hour time difference from us, opposite end of
Yeah.
the world. We will never be affected, both offices simultaneously. We have backup we're impervious to any sort of
Yeah.
natural situation in the world. And as I called my manager over there, he said, "Hey boss, they just came up to, the government came in and said, we have to close the building down, that the country is shut down. What's the name? Durante, the president of the country made everybody go home, and I think at that point
Wow.
he had put out an order that troops could open fire on anybody walking in the streets of the Philippines because he
Oh,
wanted everybody in their homes locked away so this pandemic didn't spread, because they don't have the kind of system we do to be able to hospital. We didn't handle it well either, but anyhow, so it was the craziest thing to be driving a few minutes after this office closed, and then my manager there is telling me we're closed too, simultaneously on the other part of the world. We all got hit with this thing simultaneously. It was amazing to me. Yeah.
and then, so what did you do there to survive, right? Because it's like no one's taking cruises. I mean, those were like the horror stories at the time. Like nobody
Oh,
wanted to get
probably
quarantined on a boat. But like that's the last thing you wanted.
you, it would be the worst business you could possibly been in. And when I wrote the business plan for Cruise Direct, I did have this in there because you always want to do your potential threats to the business. Everybody needs to do that in a business plan. You need to think what to help anticipate, like, what are those potential threats that could take me out, right? Whatever that happens to be, you really need to understand those things. One of them
Sure.
was pandemic. I had that, believe it or not, built into my business plan, but my pandemic was a regional pandemic. I never
Mm,
could even contemplate. I couldn't even imagine a global pandemic simultaneously taking down the whole planet.
yeah.
So there was nothing I had put in there to be prepared for that. Sort of the redundant office was one of those things, because at one point the Philippines did go through bird flu years ago. So if they got shut down from it, we'd be okay. We'd be over here picking up where they left off, but we couldn't do that.
So you go from 3 dozen and then and close all the offices and send everybody home and then
We went down
pray
to,
like
we went to, well, yeah, in the Philippines, there's nothing we could do because all those people had to go home and they didn't have internet access at home at the high speeds that we needed it. And we landed up and I kept everyone as long as I could. But, we always thought it was 3 months away, the end of this thing. And I don't know what we were smoking at that point to believe that. Because if you look at the last pandemic back in the early 1900s, it didn't end quickly. It took some time, and we had no vaccination for this at that point in time. And we just kept saying, for some reason, like us and the suppliers that I worked with, we were constantly talking, having these like important, urgent meetings, talking about nothing really except that it was all going to end in 3 months. And it never ended. In my industry, it lasted longer than anybody else's industry because we ended up going. I really don't think we were fully back up and running for probably about the industry itself wasn't really fully back up and running for about 2.5 years. Because no one wanted to sail. You had to get a vaccination to get on the ship. You had to be tested to get on. You had to be tested to get off. You had to walk around with a mask on the ship. Like if you had a problem, you were coming back into the country and you were tested positive. Like they didn't even want you back in your country. So it was very hard for us.
Yeah.
So we just shrunk down to a skeleton crew and ran it until I felt like, and at one point we did start early and spent tens of thousands of dollars on marketing because we thought it had ended, but it really hadn't. And I think probably that really sort of, after that put us back into, I guess, more or less a shell where I said, we are not coming out of this thing until like I see the whites of the customer's eyes, until like we really know they're back and we really know they're sailing. We're not attempting to turn this thing back on and start spending at the same levels that we were in the past. And then it slowly started again, probably about 2.5 years ago now, I think. Yeah.
And that must be, I mean, like you said, the hardest part about all of it probably was the fact that people counted on you. And I can only imagine how hard it was to have to let people go. Like that conversation must be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you start first by trying to reduce compensation and salaries and like, let's not get rid of everybody, but guys, we're all in this together and let's reduce those salaries. And some people, e-commerce was booming. So some of those people I had were like, hey boss, I'm heading off because travel is not working, but everybody else is home buying stuff and e-commerce companies are hiring. So I'm going to move on to that. So, yeah.
So not to pivot, but to pivot. I mean, in a world right now where you would think now that we're all back, we don't have a pandemic, thankfully. People are working. We even have people returning to the office. We're still starting to see that there's a new player in town that's taking all the jobs. And it's not the fact that people can't go out and do things, but it's AI, right? And in today's world, as we see that shaping the industry, how do you, as a business owner, how have you been starting to implement AI into your business? What excites you about it? But what also maybe scares you a little bit about it as well when you think about just maybe even just your industry specifically?
Yeah, and I see a couple of challenges. I mean, one is the unknown nature of the tariffs that we currently have today, right? I mean, a lot of businesses are scared, and our stock market is climbing, but it's only climbing because of 10 players like Nvidia, right? Otherwise, your general businesses are not doing well, and I think even some of the smaller ones are struggling a bit, right? So we're seeing some softness. We're not seeing as much of it in travel right now, and it's probably because a bunch of our customers are from overseas as well too. But I do feel like through some of the business friends that I have that there is a bit of a struggle going on out there because of people not knowing, right, what's going to happen in a few months from now. Are the tariffs going to kick in and really hurt us and strangle up business? So everybody's being cautious in their investments. I think the other side of it is you're right, Jack. I think AI is revolutionary. It feels like to me, like when I first got involved with the internet, but even to a bigger magnitude, like this is significant and it's a permanent change, and it's going to be a change bigger than what we saw when the internet came. And you don't know because you were born after the internet, but before the internet, nobody had cell phones and barely had any cell phones and no easy way to access quick information. You're pulling it off your magazine rack, right? Or in the newspapers or at your library. Totally different. So I see great opportunity in AI, and we're using it in a lot of different ways ourselves now. We use it for content creation. So we're using it for that. We have our blogs. We're creating the content for our sites. We have a live chat, and after hours, after midnight, live chat will turn over to AI. And we have customers that come in from around the world. So they're coming in speaking their native language, Mandarin or Spanish, and it's communicating real time with AI. And AI has looked at the millions of chats that we've had conversations with people over the years, looks at our knowledge base, looks at the outside world, and then provides them answers back, right? So that's a little bit of self-service that's happening there. We are analyzing we turn our voice calls into transcriptions, and then we analyze them through AI, and then we can scorecard our agents, which we've always done through supervisors, but now we can do that through AI real time and get real feedback back to our agents. We are using it to help write our blogs. We take our blogs and we actually put it into a software that turns our blogs into a conversational podcast, like we're on, like you and I right now.
Sure.
It's two people, and you wouldn't even recognize it unless I told you that. If you go listen to it, you wouldn't recognize that it's AI. And it's a woman and a man, and they're sort of poking fun at each other. It's like, hey, so tell me more about Alaska. Oh, why do you want to know about Alaska? Because I'm thinking about going up there. And they're just chit-chatting with each other and covering off on this content that we're creating. And we just created like a ChatGPT like open field AI conversation that's embedded into our pages that we're testing right now. We've just included on some certain parts of our pages so people can ask open questions on our pages, and we can sort of also watch what they ask so we know where we're not serving them properly. But we're using these things right now, and I think they're amazing, and they're going to give us an edge over our competition. But I see that going away at one point, and I see like we're very dependent on Google. We're good at SEO, we're good at paid search, but I also see Google taking a huge hit here. It reminds me of the early days of the search engines. Google became so popular because if you went to another search engine, there were millions of ads on them. The page ran really slow. Google was really stripped down with no ads on it at all, not an ad on that page. So everybody started leaning over to Google. It reminds me of ChatGPT, right? You're going to ChatGPT. There's no ads. Feels very fast, very lean, giving you great answers. So how does the paid model for Google work? Like, what does their future look like? They have to adapt to it, but they can't kill the golden goose, which is advertising, which pays the bills. So so I see a lot of advantages short term. I'm worried about the future for all of you guys, for anybody that just came out of college, because this is dramatic what's happening, and it's could potentially displace white collar jobs. So even if we somehow if we don't get affected by AI, which is not, I know that's not going to happen. We are going to be purely affected by this. But what even happens to my customer base? Like who are all those people that take cruises? They're all white collar workers that are accountants and lawyers and all these other kind of jobs. A lot of them will be displaced. And where did those people go? And what do they do? And how do they make money going into the future?
Yeah.
So I do worry about it, especially since there's no guardrails on it, since we haven't put any public policies around how it should be treated and how it could protect people's jobs going off into the future. So I see a great opportunity short term. I love it. I mean, I use it for everything. It gives me answers that I need. But I also worry down the road. What does this mean in another 2 to 3 years? And robotics are right behind it.
Yeah.
I mean, in China now, you can buy a robot for your house. I think the price I saw on it was $6,000, and go get me a cup of coffee. And this stuff is here and now, not necessarily in the States yet. I mean, Tesla's developing their robots as well too. They're not nearly as cost effective, but yeah. So if we get it right, look, this could solve global warming and cancer and everything else for us. But we really have to figure out how we're going to incorporate this into society. Probably a much bigger answer to a question that you had asked me.
Yeah.
But I tend to go down these rabbit holes when I think about it, because I am so impressed with it. I really am. I don't see hallucinations. I see a Deloitte consultant on my shoulder when I'm using that software.
Well, it's a lot to unpack. I mean, it's so hard to just pigeonhole it, or just say, hey, it's not this huge revolutionary thing. Like it is, like in every aspect of the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think about this all the time. And once again, why I even started this podcast in the first place. It's just the idea that everyone kind of has to reinvent in a way what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another, because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, in a way, what it means to be human. And when I really think deeply about what it means to be human, I think about creativity as being one. I think about relationships as being another. Because for the longest time, or just for the past 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, like some of these positions that we think are instinctively human aren't instinctively human. Things like being a banker, right?
Mhm.
Being a banker or being an accountant, like being an influencer, right? Being a
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
podcast host. I mean, if anything, I would almost argue like being a podcast host is more instinctively human because of just the relationship aspect and having conversation. But I guess the point is it's trying to inspire others to start thinking a little bit more about the different skills they should be picking up to help them get to be either building or being a part of some type of movement. And I think that your journey just really does a phenomenal job of like kind of showing that. Like there wasn't just one job that you necessarily did that was the catalyst. Like I easily would have thought that you would have left being in the Virgin Islands, and that's when the cruise story started. Or I would have thought
Yeah.
maybe you had been in private equity. And when you talk about exit strategies and you talk about multiples, that you had gotten your MBA from some big school and went on to be a private banker or something, right? But it just goes to show that it's not necessarily about what they teach you in the classroom, but really how you're able to take that and find more opportunities that keep you interested and engaged and challenged more than anything.
Yeah.
Because that's really at the end of the day, like we're all about to face one of the biggest challenges of mankind has ever experienced with this artificial intelligence thing. And it's like, how are you going to keep yourself, how are you going to keep your AI agent growing and
Yeah.
learning,
Yeah.
right? And it's what knowledge are you feeding yourself? You can go down the rabbit hole of brain rot TikTok tools. And trust me, I'm on the reels and the Instagram, whatever, but it's truly when you take a step back and realize like we are the original AI agent. What's up here and what are we feeding ourselves? How do we continue to challenge ourselves? Just like all these fancy models are getting challenged every day. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going to be there's going to be there's going to be pain, but I think in the end we're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
But I feel like there will be some pain along the way as people get displaced because of it. But
Right.
it's exciting and it's scary at the same time.
Boy.
But I think in the end, I mean, if we get it right, this is sort of like those movies that you saw as a kid where you come out the other side and you're in the Jetsons, right? And
Right, right.
and it's yeah, where a lot of the mundane stuff that you don't want to do every day,
The busy
you
work.
can
It's
use
the
this to
busy
help.
work that you think
Yeah,
is
you can use this to
purpose.
help you
Right.
get like so you can focus on the things you are most interested in, have most passion about that you love, right? But there has to be a model because otherwise there'll be no income for any of us, right? So I
Right,
think
right.
it's gonna be really interesting, especially in your lifetime, what's gonna happen.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
I think even
it's you
over
got
the
to be
next 5 years.
optimistic, right? Because otherwise, what are we doing all this for? Got to be
Yeah,
glass
yeah.
half full mindset to keep moving.
Absolutely. And I'm just trying to figure it out now because I feel like as I've gone through iterations over the years since the internet came out and it changed and mobile comes in and social media and all those other things, I it always took me a little time to sort of absorb that change that was coming and then, oh, now I understand this is the approach that we should take for it. And
Yeah.
I'm still in that stage right now. And I think so many other people I know are at that stage as well too. So yeah,
So I want
it'll
to
be
take us to
interesting.
the last segment here, what I call the sponge corner. In the
Okay.
sponge corner, what it's going to be, I just want to throw some rapid fire questions your way. All right. Just for a quick
Okay.
response. So we'll kind of go through them. If you want to pass, just like anything, you could say pass. But I want to give it a shot just to see what we can dig up. If there's any,
Okay. Let's see if I can get through this without choking.
need a water break too, you can let me know that as well. All right. Okay. So start with the sponge corner. We're gonna make it really easy off the start here. What's the best vacation spot?
Best vacation spot, Croatia.
Croatia.
Yeah,
Okay.
sailing the coast of Croatia.
Okay. And when was that?
Yeah.
2 years ago?
2019, right before the pandemic.
Okay. First job
Yeah.
you ever had?
First job was working in a barber shop,
Okay.
cleaning, sweeping up hair off the floors in where the town I grew up in.
Okay. Who's your mentor? Or who are someone that you've looked up to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a boss at a company that I'd worked with in the Virgin Islands. He was a really hard guy to work for, this English guy, and I think probably he inspired me. I, it'd been so many years, I can't necessarily call him a mentor, but I would say because he hasn't had, but I would say probably he was the one that maybe sparked my interest in having my own business.
Okay. You remember his name? Was it a classic
Uh,
English?
Classic English name, Stephen Crane was his name.
Stephen Crane. Okay.
Stephen
Yeah.
Crane.
Perfect. Stephen, if you're listening, thank you. Thank you for inspiring my uncle here. What's your favorite book? Or one of
Favorite book is Peter Drucker, Post Post Capitalist Society by Peter Drucker is my
Okay.
favorite book.
See, I
Yeah,
thought
and
I was waiting here for Tim Ferriss. I was waiting here 4 hour work week.
I got to be honest. Okay, so maybe it's a mashup between those two because it's very funny. A quick story on that was my wife picked it up at an airport as we're heading off for vacation. I looked at the title and I said, "Oh, come on, this is such a gimmick."
Yeah.
And I picked up something else and I started reading it as we were waiting for the flight, and I got so into it. And he does have so many amazing tips in that book, so many amazing ideas that he's really applied to his own businesses. That and post capitalist society with Drucker was it was written a very long time ago, but that guy was on the money with what he had predicted up probably through like the mid 2010s. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because when you were mentioning earlier how you were kind of the head of the curve when it came to hiring people abroad in India, I was like, did Tim steal that from you then, or did you steal that from Tim?
No, I guess thinking about it, probably yeah, that was probably a bit of the influence as well too, on how to handle some things. So yeah,
It's awesome. What would you say is something that you believe that most founders don't? Maybe it
that
could be about
most
running a
found.
business, or it could be about like the balance of work-life balance, if you will. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, after meeting so many founders, I feel like I'm we're probably in line with so much of our thinking in terms
Really?
of how hard it's going to be to
Yeah,
get done what you get done. And I think we also probably all believe, like, I can't think of anything contrary to what they believe, but I think we all believe too, the payout can be amazing in the end, right? Because you do sort of then have the freedom to set your own work schedule, but you will be sort of a slave to the business for the first few years. So,
sure.
yeah.
Kind of building off of that, is there a piece of advice in the startup world that you think is totally overrated, or you kind of hear and it makes you cringe when you're looking at some of these people on social media?
Probably, I think people often feeling like there's a ton of investors out there for you. And if you're going to start your business, you'll easily be able to you find an investor, and a lot more of it is bootstrapping than you think. At the end of the day, except for maybe some family and friends who maybe throw in a couple bucks just because they believe in you and love you, I would say most investors are not interested. They want to invest in something that they are pretty sure it's going to be viable. And that's why you end up having to give away a lot of your equity in the early stages, all the way sort of through the process. But yeah, I would say that money is growing on trees for you to pluck to fund your business with. It's a hard go on the fundraising side. So you should be planning to do it yourself. You should be able to bootstrap it yourself. So.
And when you are in those early days of bootstrapping, what's the best thing you could share with that early advisor, or what early advice could you share with that individual about how to stick it out? Right? Like everybody, when your friends are out there putting money in their 401ks and having that long 40-hour work week and you're doing the 80-hour, like, what's that one piece of advice you'd want to share with that young entrepreneur?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna want to be very careful how you spend the money that you do have. So if you do have a pool of money that you're using to run the business, be extremely frugal with it. Sometimes people get funding and they then get themselves a beautiful office and start hiring $200,000 plus people and filling the office with staff and everything else. And I think you want to be, until you are really viable, until you're really successful, I think you want to be very careful how you spend your money. So that's one thing that's really important. And understand that you're going to be working 60 hours, maybe up to 80 hours. Be ready for it, but understand that someday that will end, and you'll have the opportunity to take your 3-month vacations. When your friends who are working 40 hours a week are taking their 3 weeks a year, you're going to be able to hopefully get 3 months out of it. So
Yeah. Short-term pain for long-term gain.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Uncle Johnny, thank you so much for your time today. That's all the questions I have for you. Well, this has been awesome.
Thank you,
I
Jake.
loved it.
Yeah, it's
This
really
was
fun.
fun.
I love it. This is fantastic.
Me too. And I'm looking forward to having you come back, because obviously this journey, it's not over yet.
I'm still in the game for now. So
Still in the game for now until we get the chalet out in Denver, and then just find ourselves skiing all the time, right? Nice. All
knock
right.
on
Well,
wood.
where can our listeners find more about you?
You could check our, usually I do all my work through Cruise Direct. So I'm sort of the person behind the brand. I've always wanted the brand to stand out, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You could find me through our brands, through Cruise Direct on TikTok and on its own Instagram account and Facebook account. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. John Maguire.
Or out in the high seas, hopefully.
International Voyager. Reach out to him. Find him, folks. He is an amazing person to speak with, an inspiration to me. And Uncle Johnny, thank you for joining us on the Friday Sponge.
Awesome, Jack.